didn't have this special chair here for me. So yeah, React Conf first. We're going to get to talk about the intersection of React and coding with AI. And we've got a stacked crew here. So please welcome out. We're going to go in order here. We've got Chris, Kent, Swyx, and Theo.
It's all mixed.
Woo! Interesting. All right, so we're going to we have a short time here, but we're going to try to mix it up and do a decent amount of questions covering coding with AI in general and the intersection of React. And to kick things off, I'd love to throw it to Chris. I'd love to hear more about how Meta is using AI internally to code with React. It sounds like there's some pretty interesting progress.
Yeah, thanks for asking this. So one of the things is we've been really using AI a lot for coding in many different slices. One of the things that intersects the most with React is if you start wanting to fix a bug or change something in your app, the first thing you're going to try to do is to load your websites and then try to figure out, okay, this specific component, where actually is the code for changing it? And so we're all React developers, so we are probably all using the React dev tools and clicking and finding all of the right things. But the AI doesn't know how to do that. And so we implemented a Chrome extension that's not public yet, but internally, where we can use the React component stack and get all of the names of the components that are done for rendering this specific element. And from this, we can actually grab the code base, find the files that are responsible for this, and now we can send the files, the React components, and the prompts for the AI. And all of the new AIs, LLMs, and everything so far are able to take the work on from there. And so this has been a small tweak, using the internals of React that has really helped a lot of people, not only engineers, but we're also seeing a lot of non-engineers like PM, designers, managers start actually coding again thanks to all of this. So this is one thing I wanted to call out.
We got to get that open source now. Yeah. That'd be amazing.
So Restland, what are you doing?
I know, Kent, you spent a lot of time teaching beginners, especially not only to coding in general, but those who have been coding for a while, now learning how to use AI, adopt all the latest tools, a lot of time on MCP. What do you feel like is the thing that devs are kind of most getting wrong right now or still learning with AI?
Oh, man, I think that we're all getting things wrong with AI. That in a year in the future, we're going to look back and think we're doing all of this wrong. I think one of the things that I find is that I hear this a lot, that people say the more context, the better, right. Which is, there's a thing called context rot, where you get too much context and the LLMs get distracted by that. And this is one of the things that I love about Cursor, VS Code, and these editors that are just optimizing the mechanisms for finding the right things to include in the context and making it easier for us to include those things in context. So I think identifying the right things to include in context. Another thing that I see is that it seems, I get questions from people a lot, from beginners, which I literally just take their question and I put it into ChatGPT, and then I take that and I say, this was what ChatGPT said. It's let me ChatGPT that for you.
Yeah.
And so I guess you could say that's another thing people are getting wrong, is they just aren't asking. And so the more that we internalize AI into our workflows and then give it the right context, I'm really impressed by Sentry, for example, and its ability to get the error messages right in context. Cursor now has the browser feature, so it can just pull up the browser, and of course there's the Playwright MCP server. The more we get the right context in, I think the better it's going to perform for people.
Yeah, to your point about just ChatGPTing things, it's you realize you have so much agency now with AI where you can go solve your own problems, look up your own results to issues you run into, and teaching people that skill I found has been really helpful.
Not to say that I don't like answering people's questions. Feel free to ask me questions, but I might just ChatGPT for it. You can borrow my tokens, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, I have a suggestion. Ken, you should make a Kent C bot. Then you can answer questions for people.
ChatGPT. I have kind of done this actually with the workshop app. You can ask it questions about the material in the workshop. So if you ever go through, if you've got Epic React or something, check out the Epic MCP server.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much content there.
Yeah, there's a lot. It's fun.
Well, we have so many people here who are library builders or in the open source ecosystem, and of course, framework builders here too. What do you all think are some opportunities for the intersection of AI and React in the future for how we can design these tools better? Maybe Theo?
Yeah, I've been thinking about this a lot. I think that historically, changing your APIs is always a really scary thing. There's the combination of legacy code, but also legacy knowledge, people needing to write things differently than they did in the past. The two things I think are going to be really important now is that, like with AI, the need to maintain a stable API is greater than ever, because you're not going to teach the LLM like, oh, we deprecated that API, stop writing that. Like, hypothetically, it could get better at these things, but it's just more context to give it to keep it from going down those paths. In an ideal world, all APIs in the past would work, and new APIs would be simple enough to adopt, but most importantly, improvements in these tools should be able to occur without API changes. That's why something like React Compiler is so cool, is that whether I have an intern, an experienced engineer, or an AI agent writing this code, all of us benefit from the compiler. And I think the future is going to be more of these tools that can make existing APIs and solutions work way better, give you better insights on what's going wrong, and also tools that support old and new versions. The fact that I can take a React component from the original React blog post and mount it as a subcomponent and compose it with other components using server components in modern systems. Yeah. There is no framework or tool I know of that's had that level of innovation while maintaining complete backwards compatibility. It's truly incredible, and I think that's a big part of why React has become the default for all of these AI tools for building. Making sure we don't lose that as we continue to innovate, and also making sure that we can take all of this existing code, existing knowledge, existing training data for these LLMs and make the code that they're putting out faster without having to make us all have to learn more.
Yeah, to your point about the compiler, the more kind of high quality inputs we can give back to the models, whether it's better TypeScript errors or TypeScript support in frameworks or compilers, it just makes it much easier for the agents to fix themselves.
The amount of these AI developer tools and background agents and CLIs and whatnot that don't have LSP access and can't see when there's a type error, and they have to run like TSC build to even see if there are mistakes in your code is hilarious to me. Like, it's amazing how many of the tools still default to that.
Yeah. Swyx, you have probably the most experience of all of us in going deep on AI and a lot of the ML work and talking to a lot of really smart people in the field. Do you think there is something in particular that is holding back the quality of the code generated, the quality of the React code generated by frontier models? Because it's not really maybe it's a pre-training problem, but it's mostly just like, how do you get good data for post-training to spit out high-quality React code?
I feel like most models are really good at React, actually. So like, really the question is define quality. Like, what is good React versus bad React? If you ask, David Khorshid, he'll say anything that uses use effect, right? Anything where you have a Boolean somewhere in there, like he's allergic to Booleans. But that's all code style, right?
Yeah.
Like your opinion is as valid as mine, except where use Booleans is concerned. I agree. I agree with David on that one. So really the problem here is, what is the reward policy that you want to give to the model to bias it towards some form of correct React. And I don't think we as humans know that, so it's like very hard to teach models that. And as models train on a large code base, like they're going to regress to the mean, not the max. And you kind of need, we're sort of exhausted the sort of average developer performance, and we kind of need to elevate all of us to what a good React developer looks like. And I don't necessarily know that we know that yet. I do know that I think a lot of people mostly just care about design, and they care about instruction following and promptability. Like the sense that like your default output, it could be like, let's say like this 50th percentile, 60th percentile React, but if I prompt you, you should follow my instructions and get me exactly what I want in my code style. And if someone else with a different code style prompts you, you should also give them what they want. And that is actually good. So a multi-dimensional concept of quality is much better than a unidimensional concept of quality.
Yeah, because if we go around here, and it would probably be hard for us all to agree on the exact definition of what quality React code looks like. There's probably some shared tenets between all of them.
We all agree on Prettier.
Yeah, we all agree on Prettier. You have to have that. I've been thinking about this because I've seen some people take like parts of the React docs, like you might not need an effect, and like pass that into the models to get better output. Do you feel like there are kind of commonalities across when you're writing React code where pretty much every time you're wanting to give certain rules or context to models?
I find that for myself, I like to use cursor tab complete, and so that way I can direct it. So like the code that I'm writing is the prompt. Of course, like sometimes I want it to just build out a whole thing for me, but and that often works pretty well if I have some reference like routes and say like, hey, here's some how I do routes. Go do it over here. Like when I am less certain about the final result or something, tab complete does a really good job, and it just allows me to sort of prompt the model with the code that I'm writing, and I get a much better result in situations like that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And one thing we found within Meta is the concept of the LLM rules has been super, super powerful. So within the company, there's a lot of like a big code base, and like there's a lot of like pockets. So for example, hey, are you on Facebook.com? Are you on Instagram.com? And all of them have like their own idiosyncrasies, and being able to have like a markdown file that like whenever a file is being rendered, we inject it into the context has been like super powerful. So this way we can say, hey, this specific part, like for Instagram, like we're going to work with the Instagram like foundation team to help like actually write those, and then we can do like some evals and some graders to make sure like all of the codes that follows this is very useful. So being able to break it down and steer the model in that direction have been like really like for big code bases like a huge godsend. So,
yeah. One thing I want to maybe I hate when panels everyone kind of agrees and is friendly. We need to spice it up a little bit. So I'm going to disagree with Ken a little bit just for the sake of argument. I think that there's a kind of developer, which is our generation of developers, I'm putting myself included with you, where we tend to use tab complete a lot because we want to stay in control of the code. We want to like almost like write, like just like see every character appear together. I would say the newer generation, the Gen Zs, are not doing that at all. And one of the biggest shifts I've seen over the last 2 years is the move from tab complete coding to agentic coding. And obviously that's like Cloud Code, Codex, Devin, and all those other guys where like you're not prompting it with the code that you're writing, and you're not doing line by line. You're just doing entire file changes all over the place. It is very messy. It introduces sometimes more problems than it solves. But I do think that that is a change that is coming because it is so effective, and it is opening up development to so many more people than it used to be. So I think the people who can be productive with agentic coding are much more productive than the people who are productive with tab coding, I think. Especially because those rules that Chedeau was talking about, they tend to scale more in agentic coding just because you can apply more things in those kinds of models.
I think I'm somewhere between you two. I'm going to do a weird comparison here and talk about TypeScript for a second. When I first got into JavaScript, it was for plugins for a broken WordPress site. I didn't really use, or to be frank, like JavaScript. I started writing it more seriously in React as well in 2018, is when I actually sat down and used it to build real stuff. So I got in post-TypeScript, not pre-TypeScript. And I feel like on one hand, that means I'm behind as far as people would be concerned, but from my experience, it's actually quite the opposite. I felt like I didn't have all of this baggage in my brain for how you had to write your code in such a resilient way because you couldn't trust any type anywhere because there weren't any. And I was able to move much faster because I didn't have to unlearn these previous things that slowly the industry shifted away from. I didn't have the same testing patterns because I wasn't checking what happens when you pass a string to a function that expects a number. By getting in late, this new abstraction let me not waste my own context in my brain on things that we have solved with tooling. And I think more and more, as we look at the layers of technology that we build with, where we have assembly on the bottom, then a language like C. When C happened, people would look at the assembly code coming out for a while. Obviously, we don't really do that anymore. Then we start building engines like V8 for JavaScript. Nobody's looking at how the ops are handled underneath the JavaScript code that you're writing now. They did for a bit. I'm sure Google still does, but most people don't. React code was interesting because for a long time, people knew what the React.createElement calls would look like for their JSX. Who in the audience has used React.createElement for anything other than the root in the last 5 years? I see 5 hands maybe. Yeah. As we introduce better solutions, the need to know the details of the previous era fades really fast. And I think we're at that now with AI, where that's the abstraction on top of React, where in one hand, like, we care, we know how the code should look, we expect that, but as the tools get better, the need to care about that is going to go away. So it's almost like our parting gift to make sure that these things are good enough that the people in the layer above don't have to waste so much context in their brain on the things that we have been doing for the last 10 years.
Yeah, I'm curious where this plays out next, because it seems like the models are getting pretty good at React code in particular. Obviously, there's plenty of HTML and CSS in the world, and Tailwind, which makes most front-end things or your library of choice pretty easy. So what does it look like now as we get further down the line? Is there some kind of ceiling we're going to hit with generating React code where it's like good enough, or what's going to be next?
I'm curious about your answer.
Yeah.
I mean, I think for my answer, like, going back to your point around breaking changes, I think that is the hardest part with ecosystem churn right now, where different versions come out. It makes it hard to have an agent just go run and update your whole code base. So you need this mix of the non-deterministic AI agents that can go do a bunch of stuff, and then they can call the deterministic code mod that does the bump from version 14 to 15 and so on. So I feel like the models are good enough at writing most React code now for most things, but once you get the very large code bases with very unique business requirements and constraints, like, that's where you really have to go hard on the rules. It's like, no, I never want code like this. I really want it like this, and try to provide more examples. And then in the most extreme cases, it's like actually encoding that into a model. It's like we have so much opinion that we actually want to take a model and distill it down to something that's just for what we need.
Yeah. So you were talking about migration. One of the things that blew my mind is, so like 10 years ago, like Christoph Nakazawa was talking about like JS code shifts, and like, okay, how do you do AST transform to change from one side like to the other? Yeah. The good thing is last year we've been able to like actually generate, like, using AI, this kind of like code mods to do it. Yeah. But the next step that blew my mind is right now within the company, we're doing a lot of code mods that are like markdown based. And so you give a markdown file with like, hey, this should look like this, like before it was this, now it's this, before it was this, now it's this. And like you give a bunch of examples like in plain text, like a documentation, and you send it to the LLM, and the LLM is going to actually do all of the code mods. And this kind of like thing like really blows my mind around like how it widens the like potential of people able to like write this kind of like transformations. And so I think like a lot of the work like in tech is code migration from one system to the other. And so I think this is going to really be super helpful, even though it's not super flashy around like, hey, I built like this brand new like 0 to 1 app.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'll also say, so like Cognition does a lot of migrations. That's like the vast majority of the business is just migrating like some Java 8 to like Java 10 for some Windows Enterprise thing somewhere. And like, don't forget like, don't try to stuff everything in a prompt. Sub agents are good. Like a verifier agent is good. And that's basically, I think, a core principle in AI of like it's much easier to verify something than it is to generate something. And if you actually have LLMs on both sides, this is what we call the generator-verifier gap. It is actually a much more productive process to play those off against each other, which is one thing that we exploit in Cognition.
Yeah, building off that, we only have a few minutes left, but it would be interesting to hear like some pro tips on working with React and AI from you all. Like one small thing for me is like when you know some of the tools to use, you know the right tokens, you can just more effectively steer the agent. So let's say you're trying to do cleaning up unused code or cleaning up unused dependencies, you can just say like, hey, go use nip, which is a really great tool, shout out to nip, and it can just go and run the deterministic code for you.
Can you spell that? NYP?
It's KNIP.
KNIP.
Yeah, it's a good tool, open source. Any other ideas or pro tips, best practices that you can take back?
Use the React compiler linters.
Yeah.
Pretty good.
AI code review is super, super helpful. There's a ton of good options now. Just having that, like, not just because like we'll catch a bunch of mistakes that no one else will, but it makes me feel like less of a burden to my team when I put up a vibe-coded PR, because I'll get the first pass from an AI telling me everything that's screwed up before my team looks at it and tells me that I wasted their time making them review it.
Yeah. If you haven't tried it, it's actually good now. Every company has some kind of code review bot. Actually, my tip was more a career tip, guys. the AI people don't know how to write front end. Right?
So true.
This is why I like started AI Engineer as a movement, because like this is a one-time career upgrade for React people to go over to these Python people and say, okay, like you guys are good at the back-end stuff. Like, well, we'll take the front end from here.
Hey,
right?
don't look at the comfy UI code base; it'll hurt you.
They
work really
they're
hard. It's
horrible.
an
They're
incredible
horrible
thing.
at this. Their best thing is like Streamlit. Like you can do better. They have no idea. Like this is so easy for us. It's a one-time career upgrade. Like so, my thing is like it's a career shift for a lot of people. And so, more than any individual like coding tip, it's just more like if you are kind of not seeing the opportunity here, I would encourage you to jump into it. They want you. They find it hard to hire front-end people that are good.
Yeah.
And everyone here is like self-motivated enough to be good.
Yeah, that's an amazing optimistic note to kind of end on. So thank you so much. Please come find us later if you want to talk more about AI.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good time to stop.